We can take this off and we can see the mechanism. This has been redesigned quite a bit from the original. It's a different motor. All the motors are different to the original. The original used PDU motors, so I've changed them to tape deck motors, which run much more quietly. And the gearing has needed to be changed too because of the different motors, and also slightly redesigned to remove a clutch inside this mechanism, which wasn't very satisfactory. When this moving rail comes in, it activates a switch here, and that starts a motor underneath here. This motor has stopped running. I have to remove this. This is the timing unit, if you like, down here. Yes, as this arm comes back in, you'll see this motor here activated, which is just finishing now. It reverses the current in the track, allows the train to proceed. This is a 3-speed automatic gearbox designed by a Dutch gentleman and featured in Meccano Engineer in 1976. I only had a photograph from the internet, a video of it working. So it's quite ingenious. You can put a load on the output shaft and there'll be no slippage when it changes down, because you've actually got 2 gears in mesh at the same time. At the moment, first gear is a mesh 4-to-1 drive. If I release the shaft a little bit, second gear is engaged, but you can, these two here, the 3-to-1 gear, but you can see the 4-to-1 drive is still engaged. This ratchet is freewheeling slightly to permit the 3-to-1 drive to actually take effect. And then when the shaft speeds up, top gear 2-to-1 is engaged. When I put a bit of load on the shaft, the 3-to-1 will be engaged at the same time as this, but it's the ratchet's freewheeling, and the higher ratio is the 2-to-1 is in effect. The differential here allows, when a load put on, for the lay shaft to be pulled back to a lower gear. So the speed as well as the load determines the gear.
Hi, I'm Rick Vine from the Auckland Meccano Guild, also Melbourne Meccano Club. I came back to Meccano in the early 2000s. I think like most Meccano boys, you started young and then come teenagers you move on to other things. But I came back, I heard about the Auckland Meccano Guild, and so I joined the NZFMM, get the New Zealand Meccano magazine, and one of the first models I started with was this one. It looked fairly simple. It turned out I didn't have many of the parts, so you have to go out acquiring and painting bits and pieces. I rather liked the small cars, and I saw this on the internet, so I bought a few more parts and made up the old 2CV. Following on from that, I got a bit more tricky, and I got the plans for this from the Canadian Meccano Club for a London double-decker bus. I then saw in Constructor Quarterly they had a Bugatti, a little Bugatti model, and I just thought, well, I'll change it a little bit, put red on instead of the blue, and the exhaust pipe along the side, and called it an Alpha. Also from Constructor Quarterly, probably my favourite model is the Rolls Royce, which is just rather a nice model to have. I do buy modern sets. You can see I've built the Ferris wheel. If I take a modern set, I like to do something just a little bit different, and like I've motorised that one, and the Tintin Jeep has also got a a motor in it as well. I'm also a fan of Doctor Who, so I built myself a little Dalek.
That's your own design, not a model?
That's my own design, yep. For novelty purposes, I just...
One more?
My name's Bob Lack, part of the Auckland Hornby Collectors Group. What are we doing at a Meccano convention? The Hornby trains are made by the same people as Meccano, and in fact are a spin-off. The very early set, 1921, is in fact assembled with Meccano bolts, Meccano axles for wheels, and that was how the Hornby set started, as a specialised Meccano set. Then, as they developed into a line of their own, assembled in different ways and separated from Meccano. And so what we have here is a range right from the 1920s. This set would be about 1928 or so, a number 2 set. And what we have running goes from then onwards right through to the 1960s. And then the maroon locomotive there, the final pride of the Hornby line, the Princess Elizabeth.
Something about different gauges? Can you talk about different gauges?
No, what we have here is all O gauge, but there was another Hornby range called the 00, which was half the gauge of the ones we have here. I'm sorry, we don't have any of those to show you here today. That was part of the precursor of what became 00 gauge, which is still used by many people today as the basis for fine-scale model railways. Quite a rare piece here, New Zealand Railways. Hornby did export to quite a number of countries and produce engines in their own style. The one you're looking at there, though, is somebody's home-built NZ Railways one.
Yeah, I'm Brian Hickson from Pataru, and I've been modelling Meccano for around about 60 years. I got into it at an early age and I've never let it go. So this particular model here is a tethered helicopter. It was one of Simon Moody's Clockwork Challenge models using a #1 Clockwork motor. The objective was to see how far you could make this helicopter travel. So wind it up. The really important bits were it had to be light, and it had to be well balanced, and it had to have sufficient diameter that you could cover a fair bit of ground with every revolution. And that's what we've achieved with this particular model.
You can talk as it goes.
Yep, she's on her way now. She's risen. Around she goes and gradually gets faster and faster.
So what was particularly hard about this?
Well, I didn't think there was anything hard, but nobody else made one, so they changed the subject to the challenge, which was something else. I can't remember. I think it was steam traction engines ended up as the challenge that year. The truck and trailer was another of Simon's Clockwork challenges. The original model was in the Set 9 book of the 50s, and the objective was one of two things: build a model exactly according to the book in exhibition class parts, in other words nice and clean and shiny, or modify it. And there was a challenge to the modification. The truck had to be able to do a figure 8 under its own power. So that meant devise an automated steering system that would do that. So I started with the trailer, and I didn't like what was in the book, so instead of just tin wheels I put the rubber tired wheels on, and duals of course, as most modern trailers have. It's sprung both ends. It has a hand brake which is applied by lifting that lever there, and it locks against the rims. The original, of course, had the tin wheels and the lock plate coming in behind the rim, but you couldn't do that with the rubber tyres. To unlock the brake, pull that back again. The chassis was built differently from the model, mostly to make it look like a modern trailer chassis, and the drawbar is a great improvement over the original. The next detail, I started building the truck and realised that the truck was actually, the tray of the truck was wider than the trailer, and I thought, well, that's not the way things should be. So I modified the truck initially, narrowed the chassis and such like, and then found that because I'd narrowed the chassis, the motor would no longer fit sitting flat, so I stood it up. And that meant that I had to take a right angle drive off the motor to get to the gearbox, and also that to get to the winder here, I had to put a tilt cab on it, so it was another modification. And we'll take that off there and put the cab down again. If we tip the truck up, we can see here where the drive comes, that goes to the gearbox. The gearbox is 2 forward speeds and reverse, and the original never had a differential, so a differential has gone in there to enable the thing to turn corners. Bearing in mind, of course, a number 1 clockwork motor is not very powerful, and you need to give it all the assistance you can. Now, the automated steering system is dependent, it's driven off the output of the gearbox, drives through that shaft there to that worm gear, across to this chain and sprocket here, and then to a long shaft that goes forward and drives at the other end of this wheel here. That continues to revolve as the vehicle moves, and the bell crank, of course, on a longer throw goes like that, left, right, left, and thus it will prescribe a figure 8. The engine brake is applied by lifting the exhaust stack. The cab is tilted, the engine is wound. There's the gear lever there, right back is second gear, first gear, neutral, and reverse is right forward. And that sticks up between the seats on the inside, as you will see, accessible to the driver. When the cab is down, the steering wheel is connected to the steering system, but I can't turn that there because there's a worm drive in the supply, the automated supply to the system. However, the motor's wound, driver's in, we drop that in, and off it goes. So that's, there are quite a lot of other minor modifications too, such as the front axle assembly with a change of pivot pin. The original Meccano system, the pivot for the axle, the kingpin is sort of half an inch away from the wheel, which means that the wheels cover a lot of ground forward aft, and it puts a lot of side load on the kingpin bearings. But because we haven't got much power to turn the steering, we've got to reduce the loads as much as possible, and thus a system where the kingpin is as close to the tyre centre line as I can get.
Yeah, hello, I'm Daryl Anderson of the MWT Club, which is Manawatu, Wanganui and Taranaki. I live in Taranaki and have been a Meccano modeller for the last 25 odd years. Made all sorts of things over the years, and this is the largest crane that I've ever made. Purely as an exhibition model, it's not based on any particular make and model or anything like that. It's just out of my head, just for entertainment. It was fun to build, fun to bring up here to Auckland, and
Is it working?
yes, okay then. It's got three motors, all powered, or 3 movements, I should say. The slew, which is the rotation, and I just press the button there. You may have heard the beep of the radio control unit picking that up. So it's slowly slewing around at the moment, and I'll press another button which will bring the hook down. The winches and everything, it's just all out of the head, and just design it as you go. The third one is the trolley, which brings the trolley in and out. So now the trolley is coming in. Takes probably about a minute, right from one end to the other. Purposely set slow, just as crane should be. Nothing worse than a crane moving too fast to scale. These radio controlled units are new. They're really simple to use, just 4 wires, wire for the power, 2 wires for the power and 2 wires to the motor, and they've just got a forward and reverse switch. So it's just a pure switch, there's no speed control in them. There is 10.5 kilos of counterweight on the end there to keep it in balance. But the crane is just sitting there, it's not screwed down to the floor or anything like that. All the weight is on the bearing at the top. You can see the brass rollers at the top, all the weight is on there, and the tapered guide coming down is to stop the whole thing sort of tilting, to keep it all level, because there's the movement in the Meccano parts, there's tolerances, so over that length of the jib there would be quite a wobble in it if it was just sitting on the bearing without that other support.
My name's Stan Baker. I've been a Meccano enthusiast, basically since I was 8 years old, but I came back to it when I was in my 40s and have been doing it on and off ever since. I actually import all the parts that are here from India. These are replica parts, but very similar to Meccano. This is a French knitting machine. Meccano's been going about 110 years now, and there's no record of anyone having built a French knitting machine up until Easter last year, when someone in Nelson, David Couch, developed one. His one was quite complex. It had 4 motors for the 4 needles, but the idea was there, and a lot of people, including John Stark and Nelson and Graham Yost, developed it to get a much better and better running machine. Hugh Ramage in Wanganui also made a major advance in it, and my model that I've built here, which still isn't working but will be by the time the exhibition opens tomorrow, is basically a lot of enhancements of my own as well. It's jamming at the moment, but basically if it wasn't jamming, that's what the mechanism would look like with it. But by tomorrow it won't be jamming and it will be working, and it will be operating hopefully at about 15 times that speed, so it should be doing about 1,000 stitches a minute. So at that rate it would take this ball of wool about 20 minutes to turn into one long French knitting.
I'm Max George, I belong to the Wellington Meccano Club, and I've been involved since the first convention about 35 years ago. Just after I managed to pick up some Meccano from a neighbour's place, and I've built up from there, and I've done quite a few models, but this is my favourite one of Little Joe and Tricky Track. The Little Joe and Tricky Track, the original design was by Dr. Keith Cameron in the United States. It was only a basic little set, but there's been an extra plan, a model plan that's been designed with a lot of these tricky bridges in mind, and the whole thing with different little bridges, and my grandson says bridges must have sides. The original plan didn't have those, but had to put sides on it. And he also said train tracks must have tunnels, so we've got a tunnel that we designed for it. This next bridge that's going over is an under-over bridge, which was designed by Dave Dennett in Melbourne. And coming around to a transporter bridge here, which was built from photographs from the Maylands Meccano Club over in Perth. The rocking bridge, and now through the underbridge. Coming on to a diverter where the train's going to be diverted around a... I'll take it back.
That's all right. No, that's fine.
This is a collapsing bridge where it lifts the track up. When it comes past here, the engine catches this lever here and drops the bridge, so it collapses it for next time. And with the reverter it comes back, so it always goes round the one way. Okay, if I just take the cover off, just the batteries and the little motor in there. You can see it, you might see it better from the back. So all that drives it along, and these new batteries I've got they will last all day and probably half of tomorrow as well.
Okay, I'm Chris Morton from the Manawatu Wanganui Taranaki Club, NWT, and I've inherited some models from some of our deceased members. And this one, the revolving motor chassis, dates back to the 1950s. It was seen by Alistair Tong in a shop window